It is time for everybody to wake up and dispense with this nonsense about Carson Wentz starting the rest of the season. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. This episode is going to be primarily about Carson Wentz. Because it's the bye, I can take topics like the Vikings' run defense and their coverage and what happened up front with the Vikings and how they neutralized guys like Myles Garrett and to a lesser extent TJ Watt. I can hold those for later episodes, and we're going to go over them in a lot of detail later in the week. But also because it's the bye, that means that it's sort of become decision time here on Carson Wentz and JJ McCarthy. The reports about JJ McCarthy were always that this was going to be an injury that kind of takes him to the bye, and that the hope was that he would be ready to start against Philadelphia. If he's still injured and he has to sit out more games, so be it. But assuming that that reporting is correct and that JJ McCarthy is going to be healthy and ready enough to play in Philadelphia, now it's time to grapple with the question that everybody's kind of been looking at. Personally, I don't think this is close. I don't think that it is a hard decision at all. And I think you just have to look beyond that, like, biting little, what if it's Sam Darnold again thing? Because it is not Sam Darnold again. It is not Josh Dobbs again. It's barely Nick Mullins again. The Vikings have found a way to win a couple of games. And I get it that statistically the offense has been way more productive in the 3 games with Wentz than in the 2 games with McCarthy. From an EPA per play perspective, it's like not even close. And I get that. That would be a pretty undercooked way to get to a conclusion about who should start at quarterback. So I'm going to lay this out. But first, I think we need to discuss what the standard is for making a switch at quarterback on purpose. And to bench JJ McCarthy. That's what this is, right? You have to kind of say, well, we're riding the hot hand, but really you're taking that kid and you're saying, hey, bad first 2 games, sit down, we're done with you. And ostensibly for the rest of the season, right? You're not doing this with Carson Wentz and saying, and we're going to start him for 4 more weeks while, McCarthy gets a little more ready. That wouldn't be what this decision is. It would be, if you think Carson Wentz is a better quarterback right now, you probably think he's going to be a better quarterback in December too. Like I struggle to see where we'll do it till Thanksgiving. Like what you would expect to change in the next 6 weeks of more JJ McCarthy riding the bench. He's been on the sideline watching and taking mental reps for long enough. The only way he's going to grow is by actually playing at this point. And you're just going to kind of shut that down, cut the engines on it. That's what you have to be willing to do. So what is the standard to make that decision? And so I've argued with Arif Hassan on the Squad Show about this a lot. And he's talked on his own show about it a lot too. And I think that he's set the correct standard, which is it has to be what makes the Vikings the best in 2025. I think Arif focuses a lot on like the week by week of it. Like, okay, what is the best chance to beat the Eagles? What is the best chance to beat the Chargers and so on? And I think you can broaden it a little bit and say what makes the offense the best version of itself this year. Not what is best for the 2027 Vikings, right? Like, well, you might not all be around for the 2027 Vikings. You're not doing this for 2027 and 2025. You're not playing for 2027. You're trying to make the best version of the offense right now. So the question becomes, does Carson Wentz make the best version of the Vikings offense right now? And I think you're genuinely out of your gourd if you think that's the case. I think you're just off your rocker. The key point of this, Kevin O'Connell is calling for Carson Wentz, the offense you call when you do not trust your quarterback. And it will be severely limited in future games. As the games have worn on, the offensive play calling decisions have truncated and simplified and sort of boiled down into this preseason kind of offense. He's calling the staple plays. And so that's the first kind of notch in like, is this the best version of the Vikings offense? No, it's not even the version of the Vikings offense Kevin O'Connell wants it to be. He is coaching around his quarterback, not his quarterback is propelling what he coaches. That's not what he wants. And I think that he believes that JJ McCarthy can propel his actual play calls. That's why he called plays the way he did in the first 2 games of the season. But I do take umbrage with something, and this is something Arifas said in the argument we had about it on the Squad Show and other shows too, that like JJ McCarthy's been like the worst quarterback in the league, because statistically that is true. It's also 54 dropbacks. 54 total dropbacks. 9 of them are sacks. So I think it ended up 41 ended up being like counted attempts. I think there's some like throwaways in there or something. 41 passes, 54 dropbacks is just not enough to say, yeah, that'll be the worst quarterback in the league. Yeah, that guy's not going to be better than Joe Flacco or what you've gotten out of like Cam Ward or Jake Browning. Yeah. You can't say that after 54 dropbacks and be like definitive about it enough to say we're shutting that down for the season and we're going to go with this backup quarterback who's only running like stick and spacing and slants and maybe choice, maybe like a quick out to the sideline or a go ball. And I'll get to in a bit what Carson Wentz's game really is, but I need you to understand right now that in this context, Kevin O'Connell is not calling the Kevin O'Connell offense. He is calling the backup quarterback, baby's first starter deck offense. And that is just not going to sustain a high level of production. I should also mention a ton of that production is buoyed by a huge pass to Jordan Addison that came on a busted coverage. If you look at like completion percentage over expectation or success rate, the stats are still pretty good. So I'm not going to say that like completely, warps everything we always think, but it is worth keeping in mind. But that's like the thing. So if we are going to do the Carson Wentz thing, the standard doesn't need to be better than the worst quarterback in the league. Because I think that's deeply unfair to a young quarterback who's 23 and started and has played 2 games with 54 dropbacks in it. I mean, you get 54 dropbacks in 1 game sometimes. So 2 fairly low volume games, a lot of it because the defense couldn't get off the field or because there were 3 and outs and interceptions. Some of that's his fault, but still, like to basically look at that and say this will be the same forever. And then to look at Carson Wentz and not think that the simplistic offense O'Connell has to call for him won't encounter bigger problems. I think that's just not a projection that I'm comfortable with really either way. So I can't raise to that standard. But what I will say is that Carson Wentz hasn't been a potato either. He has done some good things that I should mention in an argument about this, and try to define his game the best I can, and then circle back to comparing between the two and what they actually do. But at the crux of my argument, it's that, yeah, the 23-year-old who's played in 2 games, that's probably not just who he is forever. It's probably not who he is for the rest of the season. If JJ McCarthy plays the rest of the season, you won't be super shocked to see that the Atlanta game ends up being the worst of his year, maybe even career. That was a really, really bad game. But to think that that's the median outcome for him probably isn't great. And also, we talked about it a lot in the week after that Atlanta game. He did some bad things, but a lot of that game wasn't his fault. He was under like 60% pressure. There were issues up front with like Justin School. There were issues, they didn't have Addison yet. There were guys that weren't quite healthy up front and stuff. The play calling was a lot different. Like the degree of difficulty was way higher for JJ McCarthy. And I critiqued that. I said like Kevin O'Connell probably should simplify this a little for McCarthy too. Not as much as he's done it for Carson Wentz. That's way excessive. If you have to do that for McCarthy, then my point kind of falls apart. But you should probably like back off the double moves a little bit and try to run stuff a little bit more normally. I'm not super surprised to see that the normal stuff worked. It's good. But we've gone too far the other direction now. So let me explain what I mean about that and Carson Wentz's game next on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. It's the bye week, and that is a great time to get involved with FanDuel if you're looking for a little extra something on the side to keep you locked in on games that you otherwise wouldn't really care about, like Thursday Night Football. It's Eagles at Giants. It's an interesting game with the Eagles in a weird spot culturally and the Giants backed into a corner, but maybe you just don't care about the NFC East, so why don't you put down a buck on over 40.5. The total is set at 40.5. Feels low to me for an Eagles game. Or maybe you disagree with me and you think it's totally fine. You can take the Eagles minus 7.5 or the Giants plus 7.5. Whatever it is, if you're new, you can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. So you could take like the Eagles money line. It's minus 390. There's no juice on it as it is, but if you put $5 down and you're new and it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Moving on with this episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Let's dive into Carson Wentz's game. And without now that we've kind of set the standard and we understand what this needs to be the best version of the Vikings offense. What is the best version of the Vikings offense? And what can it be? Well, we have to compare that with what Wentz is right now. And because Wentz is in his 10th season, I think we can pretty safely surmise that you're not going to see a ton of improvement and growth over the season. He is who he is. And that's a guy that's bounced from team to team for the last 5 years, didn't work out in Philly, didn't work out in Indy or Washington or whatever, right? Been a backup quarterback. I think Wentz is a backup quarterback, like true blue backup. There's enough good in his game that he's worth being on your roster, but enough inconsistency and enough sort of debilitating issues that you can't actually make him your franchise guy and run an offense through him. I think he's a good quarterback to like bring in for someone to compete with, but not necessarily be a long-term starter or not somebody that you even really want to start throughout the season. I think he's perfect for a backup, right? Put him in the Jacoby Brissett world. Maybe not even that. I think he's played closer to like a Nick Mullins level. And the good stuff that you see, there are a few throws that Carson Wentz has that are just like kind of money all the time. But what it is Carson Wentz is one of the better quarterbacks that you can imagine on the first read. If the first read does what he expects the first read to do, he will have the ball out on time. The timing will be perfect. The accuracy will be perfect. He will have that thing. He will satisfy you in any way you need, right? With the first read specifically. So what the Vikings have done is they've called a lot of outbreakers and concepts where the first read is a really simple thing. Hey, if that cornerback has inside leverage and this is an outbreaker, throw that first read. If he's here, throw that. If it's zone, you throw this as the first read. If the safety does that, this is the first read. And Wentz, by and large, is able to put that ball where he means to put it, right at the top of his drop, waste no time, ball's out quick, helps the O-line, you're happy. And some of those throws can be difficult too. One of the best things that Carson Wentz does for this offense is three-step drop go ball. In the Zimmer days, they used to call these green apple looks. I don't know what the name is for them here. They're alerts. But in a lot of plays, you'll have someone like running a clear out, right? But let's say it's Justin Jefferson. And he's running a clear out as a decoy, so you hope the defense goes with him and you do something else underneath. And the thing is, if the defense doesn't go with him, let's say you see pre-snap that Justin Jefferson's one-on-one with a corner and he's running a go, you can say, F the rest of the play, I'm throwing that. And you can make that decision pre-snap. They would call that a green apple. When you pull the apple off the tree, that green apple looks real good, just take it. The same principle is in the Kevin O'Connell offense. I just don't know the word for it. And Wentz has thrown it quite a bit. He loves to throw it on the back shoulder, and that's really hard, almost impossible when it's well thrown for the cornerback to get in on. And he can throw it pretty well most of the time. He hit one to Addison in the Steelers game. He hit an amazing one to Jefferson in the final drive of the Browns game. That is like his special. Like that is his best pitch. So those things are positive, and I think Wentz has the ability to make some plays on the run and improvise. He's certainly not the athlete he used to be. He's not going to run crazy down the field, but if he's going to get out the pocket, make a throw on the run. Like, those plays have been there. He's made some of them. One of the coolest ones was called back for penalty. It was on a free play, and he unfortunately he made a baffling turn down. I'll get to it, but he turned down what probably should have been the throw, held the ball really long, got pressured, rolled out, and ended up throwing this really cool strike on the run to Jalen Nailor for a big play. You might remember this in the Cleveland game, but because of the scramble drill, there was a holding penalty. I didn't really agree with the penalty, but there was one nonetheless that offset with the free play, and you ended up doing a redo. And then Carson Wentz again does a baffling turn down, scrambles for it just straight up, takes a huge hit, and hurts his shoulder. I should probably mention that there's a moot point in all of this if Carson Wentz is not healthy enough to practice. Right now, J.J. McCarthy is working out with Jordan Addison this week. That was the plan. And then when the Vikings reconvene after the bye, the plan is for J.J. McCarthy to practice, is at least my understanding. So we'll see what Kevin O'Connell has to say about that. But we're not sure if Carson Wentz is going to practice. And so this decision could get made for them, which allows them to kind of cop out. Because I think I share the frustration. Like, I do want Kevin O'Connell to at some point say, hey, JJ McCarthy's my quarterback. But he didn't say it in the offseason, and it was never in any question. He didn't say, I'm going with JJ. He just kind of said nothing about it and just started him quietly. And I kind of think that's just what's going to happen again. Anyways, with Carson Wentz's flaws. These are the flaws that I think are debilitating, right? There's some ball placement stuff. I will say some of the ball placement stuff that I noticed live where I was like, whoa, that receiver really had to adjust for that ball. What I didn't realize was he was throwing it under a safety or something, or he was throwing it away from a defender and then trusting the wide receiver to make the adjustment he needed to make. But it was like kind of throwing him safe. And that's actually a great way to protect your receivers. I was a lot happier with the ball placement on a slower watch than I was live. There was a little more nuance to it than I was picking up. But the problem with the slower watches, I also get to watch your eyes and watch what your read was. And if you just slow things down and watch Carson Wentz's eyes, do it with me on the Patreon video, you will see essentially the process is first read, panic. I shouldn't say panic. First read and then improvise. Him going 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 is exceedingly rare. It is much more common to see him go first read, rip it if it's there, and we love it. If it's not, he's either checking down, abandoning the progression, and just sort of vibing his way through trying to find something. He's just looking around looking for open receivers rather than going to the next thing he's supposed to go to the next thing he's supposed to go to the next thing he's supposed to go to. Or going into scramble mode. And sometimes he would go for a first read, never even look at the other side of the field, and just go directly into scramble mode as though his internal clock went off. The internal clock thing is interesting. There are two schools of thought to this. There is the school of thought of, react to pressure when there's pressure. And that's, I think, the better way to do it if you can do it, but not everybody can do it. But I would say that the best quarterbacks at dealing with pressure are the ones that have that sixth sense for if somebody is or is not coming. And if it is a super long pocket, they can hang in that really long pocket and say, well, nobody's coming. I can just sit here and I can read things out. I can let stuff develop. The other way to do it is the internal clock, where you're not really paying attention to the front at all. Kirk Cousins did this. You're not paying attention to the front at all. He would explain it. He would say, I would look at the front pre-snap, and then after the snap, I'm not looking at the front at all, which is why he would get kind of caught by surprise so many times by pressure, and why when he did get sacked, sometimes it looked like he never, ever saw it coming, because he didn't. He wasn't paying it. He would say, I don't look at that. I trust my line to do what they're doing, and I'm using all my mental energy on making my read and looking at what's going on down the field so I can make the best decision. And it's like a conscious trade-off that he made. And so he would have this sixth sense for when like 2.5 or 3 seconds was up. He would kind of beat. Okay, I can no longer trust my line to hold up. This has been too long. It's no longer fair to ask them to hold up. Now I'm going to go into scramble mode, or I'm going to go check down, or for Cousins, it was, okay, now it's time to find my outlet. I'm out of time to find my outlet. Even if there was no pressure, the buzzer went off. And for Wentz, that's what he does. He is the buzzer went off kind of guy, and the buzzer's going off real fast, way too fast. So he's getting one, maybe to the second read, the buzzer goes off, outlet, or improv mode, or whatever. if he sees a flash of color in his periphery, the buzzer will go off early as well, even if he evades that pressure. And this is something that bugs me a lot. If he's standing in the pocket and let's say somebody comes to his side, there is a play where he overthrew Justin Jefferson on a scramble drill that could have been a really, really great play if he put it on him in the Browns game. A little bit of pressure comes up from the right guard. He sidesteps it. The right guard washes that guy past the quarterback. The problem is resolved. Nobody else is close to him. He now has all the time in the world. Instead of setting his feet and throwing to Jefferson, who's breaking open, he keeps running and he tries to like off back foot, off platform, twisty, turny, weird stuff, and he ends up sailing it. And the kind of the refusal to reset your feet, it's a very panicky, uncalm thing, and it makes it difficult to maximize those scramble opportunities. He can make those throws. The throw in the back of the end zone to Xavier Scott in the Steelers game was a fantastic throw from that. And the Naylor one that didn't count was a fantastic throw. He can absolutely make those throws, but you'll just never be as consistent if you're not setting your feet. And he very often will not set his feet on rollouts and all that stuff too. He just won't get his feet set. He prefers to try to off-platform Aaron Rodgers it. Or the way I said it was like, he's always trying to be Brett Favre. He's always trying to do that cool little improv-y play rather than just executing what is in front of him, which was working. And that was so frustrating about the Browns game offensively. Guys were open all day long. The receivers went God mode. Naylor, Addison, Hawkinson, Jefferson. Somebody was winning every time. The Browns manned them up because that's how the Browns play. They'll man up anybody. They're not scared. They were open all the time. And Carson Wentz just wouldn't see it. He just wouldn't see it all the time. Or he would look at it and he would turn it down for no reason. So how that differs from JJ McCarthy and his issues and what we're choosing here is what's next on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance. You can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
Moving on to the Locked On Vikings podcast. The crux of the decision is in what kind of offense you want them to be. What the kind of offense the Vikings want to be. What does Kevin O'Connell want to be? And he wants to be a pure progression offense. I kind of think that he is going insane with Carson Wentz. And my evidence for this is the play calling, because in the Bengals game, they still did a lot of long pocket stuff, a lot of these big, long developing, kind of complicated plays, and Carson Wentz would just abandon it and go do something else, or he would check it down. It didn't come up a lot because the Vikings were running the ball a lot that game. The defense was, doing what it was doing, so they were ahead by a ton, and then they ran the ball a lot. So it wasn't a huge sample in the Cincinnati game, and I didn't end up really doing any video content about it because there were more interesting things in that game, right? With the Steelers and the Browns game, in the Steelers game, things truncated a lot. O'Connell called a lot more simplified concepts. There was a lot of stick. There was a lot of just straight up choice. There was a lot of flag or bow or choice out, which are three staple Kevin O'Connell day one concepts that are, his version of kind of the basic thing that you want to do, the easy mode stuff. And that offense struggled too. And then against the Browns, things truncated even more. I saw Kevin O'Connell calling regular curl flat or Hank. He was calling slants. He was calling spacing. He was calling preseason concepts The kind of stuff you would see an undrafted rookie in the fourth quarter of a preseason running just because you're trying to get their feet wet and get them used to like operating an offense. There were also a lot of rollouts in the Browns game. Moving the pocket helps because you had such a big O-line, D-line mismatch, but it's also an easy read for Carson Wentz, right? It is one read check down. That's usually what a rollout is. Or sometimes you start with the low pass and you go to the high one. So it's really works with his brain to say one thing and then check down. He can throw on the run, and it gives him all the time in the world to go through that read. It fits Carson Wentz really well to do rollouts. But if you overdo rollouts, we saw this happen to Kirk Cousins in the Kubiak years. If you overdo rollouts, it gets really easy to defend your offense. So this kind of stopped being a pure progression offense. It started being a sort of ISO route salad kind of thing, almost Mike McCarthy in the bad years in Green Bay a little bit, where because the Browns were just manning up, it just turned into a bunch of man beaters. Does Jalen Naylor win on his out route? Does Justin Jefferson win on his corner? Do you win on the return route? And if not, you're chucking the ball to Xavier Scott or you're going into a scramble drill. And that worked against the Browns because the Browns manned up a receiver core and then lost a bunch of reps. So like, even if you did miss a bunch of the open stuff, whatever Carson Wentz did lock onto was going to be open. He didn't need to go through the full progression to find the open guy because the first read was open so often. So you could just hit it. And it worked really well. You're just not going to have that again. You're going to have zones. You're going to have hidden players. You're going to have things that make it more difficult on Carson Wentz. And therefore, the degree of complexity is going to have to increase. And will Carson Wentz increase with it? Well, kind of famously, no. Does this not sound familiar to you? Eagles players complaining about how he's always trying to make the hero play, or that he's, not doing things as the coaches asked him to, that he's not taking to the coaching and changing his game the way that the coaches want him to. That has followed Carson Wentz around for his entire career. So I have no reason to think that it's going to get better. And projecting this forward is really the tricky part. Because if you want to look at JJ McCarthy, and you can go listen to my Patreon video about his Atlanta game and his Bears game, those are both free to watch by now too. If you want to know how I felt about those games and kind of what went well and what went poorly there. But with McCarthy against Atlanta, the chief issues were like operational, getting in and out of the huddle and that stuff. Well, I think that's very reasonable to expect that to get better over the course of a year. To guarantee it, no. Maybe it is just that much worse, and maybe you are risking that. But if I'm to ask the question, what is the best version of the Minnesota Vikings offense? It's the one where J.J. McCarthy lets Kevin O'Connell call plays the way that he wants to and can execute them. I think you have to chase that to find the best version, to find the version of the offense that actually makes noise in the playoffs. The backup quarterback, we are surviving offense does not do that. And I think for the people who are asking for the Vikings to go with Carson Wentz, like Arif and other people who are saying, like, look, the offense was better. They're 2-1, ride the hot hand. I think you are mistaking surviving for thriving. Thriving is what Sam Darnold was doing last year. And I think this was a much more legit question with Sam Darnold. And there were even times last year where, like, especially after that Green Bay game and Seattle game, where I was like, I think you kind of have to extend this guy. Like, this is insane. And look, he's doing it in Seattle too. Like that's thriving. That quarterback's playing good football and driving the offense forward. There were games, I would very much argue this about the Seattle game last year, that they won because Sam Darnold played well, that he did it. He was the truck, not the trailer. With Wentz, they're surviving. They've got all these issues. They're papering it over. They're calling what they can call and just kind of needing a guy to win a rep, and then he is winning that rep because that guy's Justin Jefferson. But I'll put it this way. The next time a team doubles Justin Jefferson a lot, which the Browns did not, and he puts up over 100, right? The next time a team doubles Justin Jefferson a lot, everything that they did in that game will not work. This is not the version of the offense that takes you places. So if you want the 2025 Vikings to survive, to be ultimately a forgettable entity and to not, to be out of the headlines. If you just want them to step out of the limelight and for nobody to look at them and we're just going to kind of coast our way to the end of the 2025 season and lick our wounds and go to the next year, go ahead and put Carson Wentz in. If you want the Vikings to fail quietly and with not much fanfare and nobody really notices, maybe that's what you want. Maybe that's what you think the best thing that the Vikings can achieve is that they fail, but nobody really looks at it. If you want the Vikings to chase success, if you want them to try to pull their team into the contender that they sold themselves as before the season, you cannot continue with Carson Wentz. You have to see what JJ McCarthy has in the tank. You just have to. And what you or I would do is ultimately a moot point. We aren't making the decision. Kevin O'Connell is. And I just can't get over the fact that Kevin O'Connell has hyper simplified his play calling to accommodate Carson Wentz. And I just cannot imagine him doing that if he has the option not to. And the second JJ McCarthy is healthy, he has the option not to. I think he's going to go with McCarthy. Plus, all the reporting we've seen is that when McCarthy's healthy, whenever that is, he's going to go in. There hasn't really been any reporting that they're giving this any serious consideration anyways. So this is really more a conversation of what should they do. There is one thing, I haven't mentioned time to throw it all, kind of. So the ball's getting out quickly when Carson Wentz is on the first read. When it's not the first read, it slows way down. He holds the ball forever and he doesn't know what to do. JJ McCarthy held the ball too long as well. A lot of those routes were too long. I found myself on the tape not too often saying, wow, McCarthy's got to throw that. I have found myself on the tape a ton of the time seeing Carson Wentz look at an open receiver, uncork the ball, pull it down for a reason I cannot figure out, and then scramble into some nonsense. You can't deal with that long term. That will turn into turnovers. That'll turn into more injuries. That'll turn into disasters on disasters, way more than it's going to turn into something good if you can't take the opportunities that are there. You just need to get McCarthy to be comfortable getting in and out of the huddle and all that stuff. And I'll leave you with this. After the Atlanta Sunday Night Football debacle game, if JJ McCarthy wasn't hurt, we would never be having this conversation. That game wasn't benchable in and of itself, but we are now treating it as benchable because we've seen 3 games of somebody else, and we've seen Kevin O'Connell basically Nick Mullins his way into like some kind of sensible offense, sacrificing everything that makes him Kevin O'Connell. But what we've seen there isn't thriving, it's surviving. And we've seen a bunch of the other young quarterbacks in the league put up stinkers, and their team has stuck by them and said, we're just going to run through this. They're not saying we're cutting the engine on the season. And I super take umbrage with the idea that putting McCarthy back in is cutting the engines on the season and saying this is a Devy year now. It was always to some degree a developmental year for the quarterback, but it's not cutting the engines on the season to go with the guy that you don't have to throw out entire chapters of your playbook for. Tomorrow and Friday, we are going to talk about something else. I have Kevin coming on either later this week or early next week for some kickoff talk, because the new kickoff is really interesting and the sort of special teams impact that the Vikings have had. We are going to make the most of this bye week before we get into Eagles mode next week. I'll see you all for all that. And as always, Skol.